Hi, everybody. Your godmother's here. We had a little bit of a technical glitch where we were on and then we're off, and now we're back on. So we're here with you with our group of authors from the Southwest Florida Horror Writers Association. I appreciate those of you who are sticking around and watching. We are from Southwest Florida, but I say that very loosely because our chapter is a large chapter in terms of numbers, but also in terms of geography. We're kind of spread out all over the place. Tonight is an exciting night. We have 6 writers joining us, and they're a very eclectic bunch. We have a lot of diverse types of horror being represented tonight. So it's almost like a buffet in that you're going to find something that you like, you're going to find something you enjoy, you're going to find something that you want to purchase and read on your own, because they're just going to tease you and give you a little bit of their writing. These are new releases. And we have 2 authors tonight who are reading something before it's even been released. So you are getting a sneak peek. You're at the forefront of horror tonight. How this is going to work, I'm going to introduce each author and then put some information about them in the chat, like where you can purchase what they're reading, and also some social media information so you can continue to follow them after tonight. Tonight's session is being recorded, so it will appear on my YouTube channel. I will include the recording of everybody, and then I'll also edit it so that each author has their own recording. So do not feel that you need to record this on your own. You can go back and watch each author individually. You can watch the author you like the best. You can watch, however you want to do, or you can watch the entire group later. So you don't feel like you need to be recording. Feel free, though, to make use of the chat box and to encourage our authors while they're reading. Now, they can't interact with you while they're reading, but it's always nice to say some kind words or to remark about something that really stood out to you about their writing. It's really encouraging for us as authors to receive that kind of feedback. At the end, I will bring all of our authors back and we will have time for questions and answers. That doesn't mean you have to wait on your question. You can put it in the chat box whenever you want, and I will try to be watching those boxes and making sure that we do respond to your questions. So I am going to bring our first author out, and that is Douglas Ford. His book is up here in the corner, as you can see. Douglas Ford is actually our chair of our chapter. His short fiction has appeared in a variety of anthologies, magazines, and podcasts, as well as 2 collections, Ape in the Ring and Other Tales of the Macabre and Uncanny, and The Infection Party and Other Stories of Disease. His longer works include The Beasts of Visaria County, Little Lugosi, A Love Story, The Trick, and Who Dies First. He lives on the west coast of Florida. Douglas will be reading from his new collection just released 2 days ago, so hot off the presses, and it is called Let's Cut Up Dad and Other Stories of Transgressive Madness. So I will put his information in a chat box. Doug, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Elaine. So this story is called Papa's Night, or The Short Happy Life of Elena de Hoyos. The main character is Papa, who is Ernest Hemingway, and the story takes place in Key West. Maybe it was Vincente who first asked about the bull's ear. Papa couldn't remember, the evening having gone hazy, not just because of the drinks, but also because of the fist that landed on the side of his head. Damn stupid of him for not protecting his left flank. Now his skull rang and he needed to keep blinking his left eye to keep things in focus. On top of that, they wanted to hear the story again about how the Spanish matador killed the bull and presented Hadley, Papa's first wife, with the bull's ear, pestering him about whether that made him jealous. Some stories he gets sick of telling. But did she eat it? Vincente wanted to know. Do tell us if she ate that ear in front of you. Shut up, Vincente, Papa said, and everyone at the table laughed. They'd all enjoyed a good day of boxing in the courtyard of Papa's house on Whitehead Street, and now, while cooling off with drinks in Joe Russell's bar, they wanted a good story. But Papa still couldn't see straight. Did Vincente hit him or one of the others? He couldn't remember. Papa looked for something further away to focus his eyes upon, and he saw the little German seated at the other end of the room, gazing upon their group through thick spectacles. Go on, tell us, said Vincente. Papa slammed his glass on the table. No, she ate the goddamn book I wrote instead. Remember, I gave her all the royalties. They all laughed uproariously at this, but Papa didn't join them. Instead, he began to feel uneasy under the German's gaze. The man looked damn peculiar, his bald head mottled with age spots and a chin sporting a pointed white beard. But his most telling feature were his eyes, magnified by the round glasses, fixed squarely in Papa's direction. He looked like an undertaker, even wearing a black suit with matching bow tie, a fashion not at all conducive with the heat on the southernmost tip of the United States. A small island at that, where many knew the German as an employee at the Marine Hospital. He called himself Count something or other, though Papa figured that name was bullshit. He also heard the man had fallen in love with some Cuban girl who came to the hospital years ago, though the details proved cloudy after the boxing and drinking. And with Vincente refusing to let such an old, tired story go, now Miguel offered quips about the girth of Hadley's throat. Vincente pounded the table with laughter, and once again, Papa's head throbbed with the memory of the fist striking his head. These men had wives and ex-wives of their own, except Pelayo, who had a prostitute who visited him regularly. Still, Pelayo referred to her as his wife, but only Papa found this amusing, the others willing to grant the fisherman his illusion. Papa tried to bait them into some good-natured needling, but they wouldn't bite. For some reason, they found Pelayo's feelings sacred, but a decade-old story about Papa's being cuckolded with a bull's ear made them burst in riotous laughter. Now he watched Pelayo saying something to the bartender, his face animated with frustration. The bartender cut the air with his hand as if to end the argument. What's that conversation about? Papa asked Miguel. Pelayo's wife didn't show up last night. Pelayo's worried she found a new man. You mean a new customer? Papa said. No surprise that no one laughed. Everyone loved Pelayo and became piqued whenever Papa tried to shatter his precious illusion. No one has seen her for days, said Miguel. Now they watched as Pelayo grabbed the bartender's arm. The bartender responded by slapping Pelayo across the face. Hey now, Papa said. Papa staggered to his feet. Nobody manhandled his friends, even Pelayo. Miguel followed his lead. Vincente shouted at the bartender, demanding him to go gentle on Pelayo, since the poor man suffered from a broken heart. They all rushed forward to defend Pelayo, except for Papa, who had to steady himself against the table, his head still buzzing. He wanted to follow them, prepared to tell the bartender that any new mark on Pelayo's face would only make him uglier, but he slumped back into his chair. Vaguely, he became aware of the chaotic throng moving outside, leaving Papa by himself. Except for the little German, still staring at him through those thick lenses. The man stood and walked over to where Papa slouched. He spoke in halting English. Sir, if you could forgive the intrusion, I wish to introduce myself, Count von Kassel at your service. He clicked his heels and bowed. Through squinting eyes, Papa considered the little man's formality. Vaguely, he recalled someone telling him the German's real name, Karl or something like that. When Papa offered no reply, the Count continued, No need to introduce yourself to me, of course. Everyone knows you as the famous writer, the greatest in the world. I've hoped to meet you at one of these evenings. I have a wondrous story to share with you, a story about the love of a beautiful woman. When you hear it, you will want to write it down. I wish to grant you this amazing story. Will you come meet her? Papa found a glass still containing some liquid. He drained it quickly and looked around the room. Where had the others gone? Spilled out into the street, apparently. The funny little German awaited his answer. Meet who? Papa asked. The Count smiled, revealing a mouthful of tiny teeth. Papa didn't trust men with tiny teeth. A beautiful woman, the most beautiful on the whole island, nay, the whole country, nay again in the whole world. I wish to introduce her to you. Her name is Elena de Hoyos. Papa searched his memory. The name rang a bell. He looked around the room. I see no one in here but me and a German with an assumed name, Papa said. As impossible as it seemed, the man's smile widened and revealed more teeth. She's at my home. Will you come meet her? Tonight will mark a glorious occasion. Trust me, you will want to tell this story. Papa looked for signs of his comrades. It seemed almost as if someone had closed the bar for business and left him here alone with the German. Fuck them, Papa decided. They crushed his skull with their fists, and now they had abandoned him. He thought about it. He could, in fact, use a new story to tell. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have some comments in the chat box. Feel free to look at those. I'm going to boot you out of the studio now. And I'm going to add to the stage Stephanie Jenson. Stephanie E. Jenson is the author of the Dissecting House series and The Howling of the Dead. She received a bachelor's degree in English from the University of South Florida in 2014. She's also a freelance writer and a music journalist. Stephanie lives in Tampa, Florida with her cats, Pluto and Luna, and I have seen them on social media and can confirm they're adorable. Stephanie will be reading from Heartbeat and Other Tales of the Weird and Macabre, which is not even out yet, so you're getting the sneakiest of sneaky peeks. You're so lucky. I'll put a link in the chat to where you can find Stephanie's other books and really, get ready to pre-order it when it is available for you. Stephanie, go ahead and begin reading whenever you would like.
Thank you, Elaine. And that actually starts me at the perfect spot because the story I'm reading is called Pluto and the Plague. And yes, it is. Well, technically, the story is about both of my cats, but the main character is Pluto, my older cat. Just so you know, the story is in the point of view of the cat. And also, I'm going to be starting this around the middle of the story. Pluto's mom has been accused of witchcraft, and she's in jail right now. So it begins the torture scene. And also, there's a little bit of French. I try to only read from like a section with very minimal French, but just so you know, ma mère means my mom, and je t'aime is I love you. So now I will begin. I wake up to the men barging into the room, unhooking my ma's shackles from the wall. Jumping onto my ma's shoulder, I hiss at the men. One knocks me to the floor, and they drag ma mère by the chains out the door. She screams and cries as they drag her. The combination of her cries and the chains making rattling noises on the floor sting my ears. Still, I will never let ma mère behind. I jump on her back, staying low and quiet. They open another heavy door and drag us in. This room is bigger than the first one, and there are scary things everywhere. Heavy objects are on the ground, and there are weapons all over the wall. Lanterns hang on the wall, the flames casting an eerie red glow in the dark room. The men take ma mère to a plank. They lift her up, and I jump off her back. I try to hide, but one of the men catch me. Ugh, this pesky cat, he snarls as he holds me by the fur on my back. Put me down, I yell. Richard, grab that X from the wall. We must send this beast back down to hell. Wait, don't kill the cat, the man Christian from earlier said. The cat is further proof that Sylvie is guilty of witchcraft. I'm not a witch, Sylvie says in a hoarse voice. If you keep denying it, the pain will get worse, one of the men said as they strapped her legs to the plank. They remove her chains but place her fingers in this weird contraption with a bar on top. The men drag the bar down so it squishes the tops of her fingers. Sylvie de Nerval, are you a witch? No, my mare exclaims. The men focus on the weird contraption on her hands. I jump on the plank and get a better look. We'll ask you again. Sylvie de Nerval, are you a witch? No, my ma yells again. The men push the bar down more, and my mare shrieks. We can still prove you're a witch. You cast spells on the public, and you have a black cat. If you keep denying it, we will strip you to find Satan's marks on your body. So how about you start being honest with us? Cast spells? My neighbors visit me when they have aches and pains, and I know the right plants and flowers to heal them. And Pluto here kills the mice near my house. He has been my companion since my husband died. So you're admitting your husband died. Of what, Sylvie? Did you kill him with your witch spells? Make a deal with Satan? No. Jean-Michel? Well, he liked the bottle. Ha! I've known Jean-Michel for many years and never saw him drink wine. He would drink at home. So you're a witch and a murderer. No, I'm not. The men pushed the bar down further. I see my mom's fingers smush from underneath the bar, and she cries out in pain. I rub my head on her fingers and lick them, hoping that takes away her pain. Strip her! Let's find Satan's mark! And can someone do something about this cat? One of the men grabs a knife and cuts my mom's dress. She cries as they examine her body. I growl, anger coursing through my veins as I see these men taking advantage of my mare. I found it, one man exclaims as he lifts my ma's breast. Satan's mark. The man points to a brown spot. I would sometimes paw that spot, thinking it was a bug, but my mare would yell and swat my paw off, so I stopped doing that. That's a mole, you imbeciles, my mare yells. This is more proof that you're a witch, Christian says. Satan's mark, your spells, and the black cat. You'll be burned tomorrow. Put the witch back in her room. The men unhook my mare from her binds and drag her out of the dungeon without putting her dress back on. I jump on her shoulders, rubbing against her cheek. She cries as she presses her cheek into my head. They put her back in her chains once we're back in the room. The men make gagging noises at me as they close and lock the door. I sit next to my mare on the bench. Her fingers poke out from her chains. They're pale and bloody, sticking out in different directions. I lick her hands and rub my head against her arm. She's still crying as she tries to lift her chained arm and pet my head. Even though my mare is in pain, I still purr. I'm happy I'm with her. I would rather be here while she's suffering than alone in the house, wondering where she was and if she abandoned me. Curling up next to her leg, I fall asleep. Today, the men said they would burn my mare. I spend the morning perched on her shoulder, giving her head buns and bathing her. My mare won't stop shaking and is always praying. She tries to pet me, but her chains hold back her arms. Instead, she always says, Je t'aime, Pluto. The men barge in and unhook my ma's chains, dragging her out of the prison and up the stairs. I stay perched on her shoulder, giving her head bumps to let her know it will be okay. Once we get up the stairs, Mama's body is more broken and bruised than it was before. She's wailing now, begging the men to spare her. They ignore her cries as we walk outside. There's a tall stake in the middle of the field, and men are already standing around the stake with a long rope line. My mare wails as the men pin her against the stake. She begs for her life while they tie her arms. More men approach my mare with lit torches. My mare begs for forgiveness, but I know that won't help. As one man is tying her waist to the stake, I jump on her shoulder and clamp my jaw on his ear. He screams as he tries to swat me off. I dig my claws into his shoulder and take another bite of his ear. A bit of skin gets stuck in my teeth, and I yank my mouth away to pull it off. The copper taste of blood fills my mouth. I swallow the blood and the bit of flesh. Arms wrap around my waist, and I'm thrown to the ground. I look up and see Christian above me. I try to jump up, but Christian kicks me back on the ground. I get back up, but it's too late. The men with torches light the wood at the base. The flames rise as a small flicker, then explode in a blaze. No! My mare screams as the embers rise. The flames kiss her feet, and she erupts and screams. She struggles through her restraints as the flames turn her flesh black. And that's it.
Wow. See what I mean by diverse stuff tonight? I was not expecting a cat point of view. Thank you for that, Stephanie. That was certainly wonderful. I am going to now introduce to the stage our next author, and let me make sure that I get his book up here so we can all see it. Where did it go? There it is. Aha. All right. Derik Cavignano is an award-winning author who writes character-driven stories in a variety of genres, including horror and dark crime thrillers. A native of Boston, Derik now resides in Florida with his wife, 2 children, and an angry cat who won't stop fighting him. We feel your pain, Derik. If you could see, I have all kinds of war wounds from cats. Awards for his novels include the National Indie Excellence Awards, the Best Book Awards, the American Fiction Awards, the Silver Falchion Award, and the BestThrillers.com Book Awards. A film based on Derik's novel, The Art of Dying, is currently in development. So Derik will be reading from The Bearing Point, and I will put his information in the chat for everyone. Go ahead and take it away, Derik.
All right. No, thank you for that introduction. Yes, I'm going to read from The Burying Point, which is an occult crime thriller about a missing girl with bloodlines tracing back to the Salem witch trials. She becomes the perfect prize for a demonic cult operating on the fringes of Salem's witchcraft underground. So this is the second book in the series. It can be read as a standalone because it's a brand new case. It follows Detective Ray Hanley as he's teamed up with a tough Latina detective named Elena Martinez. So I'm going to be reading from a section of chapter 11, when the detectives visit the missing girl's friend Abby to see if she knows anything about the disappearance. The only problem is that Abby has recently suffered what doctors think is a mental breakdown, but what might in fact be demonic possession. Okay, so Abby's room was a full shade darker than the rest of the house, and it took Ray several moments to discern the queen poster bed in the far corner by the blackout curtains. At first, Abby resembled an amorphous collection of shadows on the center of the bed, but when Mrs. Garcia struck a match to light a candle on the dresser, she coalesced into human form. She lay with her eyes closed and wore a long-sleeved cotton nightgown. A tousled mane of dark hair spilled over her shoulders, obscuring all but a narrow swatch of the pillowcase. The air inside the room felt thick and stagnant, redolent with the animal stench of a zoo enclosure. Ray wrinkled his nose and cleared his throat, wondering how in the hell a teenage girl could smell so bad. He glanced over his shoulder at Mrs. Garcia, who stood near the door with her face drawn in concern. He directed his gaze toward the bed, and for the first time noticed the restraints that secured Abby's arms to the frame. The white nylon straps camouflaged against the linen comforter. He nudged Detective Martinez in the shoulder and gestured to the restraints, but she nodded as if she'd already seen them. Abby's nostrils flared as Ray and Martinez approached the bed, her body thrashing under the sheets as if tormented by a nightmare from which she couldn't awaken. A floorboard creaked underfoot, and Abby's eyes snapped open, her lips curled into a snarl. Ray held up his badge. "Abby, we'd like to ask you a few questions." Her eyes were mostly pupil, and they blazed with a furious energy, like a cornered beast ready to strike. A growl emanated from her chest, deep, resonant, and ominous, like the grinding of rocks. She sat up to the full extent allowed by the restraints and regarded them with a leering grin. The air closest to the bed felt different, as if an Arctic blast had flooded the room with a swarm of charged particles. It prickled Ray's skin with goose flesh and coaxed every hair on his arms and neck to stand on end. Abby uttered a throaty chuckle, a gravelly sound more animal than human. Mrs. Garcia made a sign of the cross and reached for a crucifix dangling from her necklace. "What in the hell's going on?" Ray asked. "Something took hold of Abby in that graveyard," Mrs. Garcia said. "Something evil." Ray turned back to the bed and found himself caught in the crosshairs of Abby's hateful gaze. There had to be another explanation. Multiple personality disorder, insanity, or just plain faking it. Martinez seemed rattled, but she held her ground. "What happened, Abby?" Ray asked. "Did someone do this to you?" Abby's eyes rolled back to the whites, and a crooked grin creased her lips. She spoke to them in what sounded like Latin. "Et tenebris bestia resurgit." The bedroom door slammed shut with a bang, creating a gust of wind that extinguished the candle and plunged the room into darkness. Abby repeated the nonsense phrase, "Et tenebris bestia resurgit, et tenebris bestia resurgit." As Ray reached for his flashlight clip to his belt, he heard a creak of bed springs, followed by the shuffle of feet. He sensed movement to his right and swept his arm out to feel for Martinez, but all he encountered was dead air. Martinez screamed as he clicked on the light, the beam lancing through the dark. He angled it at the bed and saw Abby's arms wrapped around Martinez's shoulder. The nylon restraints were torn in half and fluttering at the bedside. He marveled at the force necessary to tear those restraints. It shouldn't have been possible, not even for a grown man in peak physical condition. Abby was drawing Martinez toward the bed, her hands now on the detective's cheeks, as if she meant to kiss her. Martinez stared into the depths of Abby's eyes, mesmerized by the appearance of golden spirals of light which seemed to ebb and flow, like the birth, growth, and death of galaxies, as if the wheels of time were winding down like a broken clock until the seconds ran backward. A dark rent opened in the cosmic vista, revealing a gaping black maw that threatened to swallow her into the belly of oblivion. In a distant world, Martinez felt herself mimicking Abby's movements, her lips parting to receive the dark seed of creation. But the exchange was disrupted by a rough pair of hands yanking her backward, and her jaw snapped shut with an audible click. A flood of images flickered before her eyes, like the clattering of an old movie reel's labored revolution, a movement like the hub, the spoke, the wheel of infinity. Martinez watched Abby's hand slip away as Ray drew her backward. His flashlight fell to the ground and reflected off the ceiling. The air before Abby's face suddenly contorted like melted plastic, her features blurring and stretching until it revealed a face behind her face, an abomination with galaxies for eyes, and a blooming flower of fangs spiraling down into infinity. A wooden crucifix spun against the wall, etching unholy spirographs into the paint. A jet of vomit streamed out of Abby's mouth and splattered against Martinez's cheek, hot, sticky, and teeming with wriggling black insects. Martinez stumbled back and screamed, clawing at her hair and stomping on the insects squirming over her feet. Ray steadied her with an arm across her back, and she leaned against him. "Let's get you cleaned up," he said. She realized from his tone that he hadn't seen the insects, nor what lived behind Abby's face. She touched her cheek and examined the bile glistening on her fingertips, but no longer saw any bugs. Because there were never any there, she thought. The crucifix wobbled against the wall and slipped off the nail, clattering against the hardwood below. The spirographs it had traced into the paint bore the unsettling likeness of a horned beast. "Do you see that?" Martinez asked, pointing to the image. Ray clenched his jaw and nodded. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a good place to stop too, because we all want to know what's going to happen next. Thanks you so much, Derik. So we're getting rid of Derik, and we are going to introduce to the stage Christopher Michael, and I'll put up his book's image there. Hello. And let me do the introduction. Christopher Michael is an author, law enforcement agent, and former soldier. Blending his real-world military experience with a love for cosmic horror, Christopher is the author of the self-published novel series Danforth, Eldritch Tales of World War II, a thrilling combination of historical fiction and Lovecraftian horror that marks his entry into the literary world. Tomb of the Black Pharaoh, the first novel in the series, was published in September. Christopher began writing when he was in high school, going over the top on writing assignments that required the creation of an original story. Since then, he had intermittently written material throughout his adult life, but only recently began to commit. After attending therapy for PTSD from military and law enforcement service, he began a new journey of using his writing as a form of therapy and channeling his demons into stories that are a reflection of his innermost thoughts. He hopes that by writing and infusing these stories with the pain and uncertainty that he has felt, that it might help other military and law enforcement veterans as well as anyone struggling with their own demons. Christopher is also a father and husband living in the Florida Keys. So as I said, we are all spread out here amongst Florida. Christopher will be reading from Danforth, Eldritch Tales of World War II. And what he's reading is not going to be released until February, so we have another sneak peek. Go ahead and start reading whenever you are ready, Christopher.
Everybody, so this is volume 2. Like I said, volume 1 is following Danforth. His first appearance is probably something that if anybody's read Lovecraft, they know he made the appearance in At the Mountains of Madness and had a mental breakdown in Antarctica. This is 10 years later, and he has been in service and is now an OSS agent in World War II. In the first book, he was in Egypt, and now he has made his way to Axis, Romania, and is in the midst of trying to train a Jewish rebel group that is going up against the Romanian and the Nazi forces that are in Axis, Romania. So I'll be starting at section 4 after he's had a meeting with somebody that's a little bit mysterious. So I arrived at the mountain refuge just as the sun began its descent below the horizon. My pace was brisk, for the pursuing shadows and growing cacophony of nocturnal sounds were increasingly unsettling. The wolves' howls echoed through the mountains like a chorus of chilling cries that seemed almost diabolically malignant. As I made my return, I encountered a small contingent of our men who were departing to relieve the watchmen stationed around the high side at Castle Umbelor, the Castle of Shadows. The departing scouts, mistaking me for a foe, immediately raised their weapons at me upon approach. However, my instinctive gesture of raising my hands and addressing them in my unmistakable American accent swiftly dispelled their suspicions, eliciting a chuckle and easing the tension among those men who were not yet seasoned warriors and still had many hard years ahead of them. Their task was of great importance, as they were part of our effort to maintain constant vigilant surveillance over the fortress, which, contrary to our prior belief, was now known to be occupied rather than abandoned. To my knowledge, none of my compatriots had ever returned to the castle. The local authorities had long forbid entry, and our group was well aware of its notorious reputation for being haunted and filled with grim terrors. The locals recounted tales from their youth, describing a game where the children dared one another to cross the castle gates, though none ever succeeded. Yet, on the particular evening, I was to hear a tale from our leader Toma that was held more in significance than I could have anticipated at the time. After entering the cave and weaving my way past several sentries and walking through multiple obstacles, I divested myself of my gear and firearm, settling beside a modest fire deep within the cave. The vast cave was remarkably convenient, featuring numerous small drainage holes formed by millennia of water erosion, positioned high in the ceiling to allow the smoke to escape. The winding passages of the cave concealed the flames effectively, but we had prudently decreed that no fires be lit until nightfall to avoid detection by enemy patrols that might see our smoke trails. All right. I approached the planning table and found Toma engrossed in sketching out a new strategy for a small ambush against our adversaries. Though his anger was palpable, he had not yet divulged the cause of his ire, but his emotions could be clouded his judgment in the planning phases. Despite our recent success in executing an ambush at a distant province without my consultation or approval, I believed that these early months and even years, our efforts would be best directed toward more subtle forms of resistance: sabotage, intelligence theft, reporting enemy troop numbers, and deploying victim-activated explosives were all tactics to minimize our exposure to capture or to death. Toma, however, was a staunch advocate of direct action, convinced that with sufficient firepower we could overwhelm the Romanian and German forces. Having studied resistance tactics and received training on operations, I understood that our survival depended on striking the enemy's weakest points. As Toma delineated the plans for an ambush 30 miles from our location, I endeavored to dissuade him from my translation. Despite the challenges, a woman, Lana, her presence was requisite for communication, even in private discussion, making her privy to our highest level conversations. The novel intelligence that I had immediately piqued Toma's interest, as I told him that I had come across a house where both German and Romanians were staying. As Toma and the squad leader stood by, I indicated on the map the precise location of the house I had spied, as well as the route taken by the trucks on the night that they had departed the castle and returned. I reported seeing what appeared to be an SS officer, garbed in distinct oak leaf camo, suggesting that he might be the commander or high-ranking officer of the specialized team. Additionally, I observed a Romanian military officer in uniform and an SS officer from the SS Totenkampfverband. All these men were flanked by several camouflaged troops. Upon identifying the location of the house, Toma and the others solicited a description. I depicted the old mansion, dilapidated, constructed in the old Romanian revival style. Toma's eyes gleamed with excitement as he proclaimed the house abandoned, suggesting that we could potentially eliminate the leadership of these units in one fell swoop without imperiling any civilian lives. I then corrected him, asserting the abode was not abandoned, which seemed to perturb him greatly. He questioned me about the occupancy in an almost inquisitory manner. I informed him that upon discovering the mansion, I found a young woman in residence. He demanded her name, and I divulged that her name was Elena. At that juncture, all the squad leaders, Lana and Toma himself, grew conspicuously silent, and I sensed an ominous shift in the atmosphere as the ineffable dread pervaded the room. Toma vehemently dismissed all the squad leaders, retaining only Lana for translation, and demanded a private conversation with me. Though it was challenging in the confined space of the cavern, the others did their utmost to afford us the necessary privacy. Toma's demeanor was somber and somewhat apprehensive. He seated himself in a crudely constructed chair by the table and began questioning me about my encounter with the woman. I could feel a kind of fear building in him, as if he were reevaluating everything he had known to be true. It was startling to witness somebody so obstinate and self-assured reduced to such a state. Toma then commenced to narrate the story of how he became to know Elena. Over 20 years prior, Toma had been a soldier in the Romanian army. He recounted at the time there was considerable animosity toward the Jewish community in Romania, yet he still served the cause and fought against the Germans and the Central Powers to liberate their homeland from occupation. This background explained Toma's profound animosity toward the Germans. Following the Russian Revolution in 1917, Romania found itself in an unforeseen predicament. Upon returning home after his unit's retreat, Toma began to notice strange occurrences. Children disappearing, causing panic throughout the communities. As a prominent member of his Jewish community, he felt compelled to assist the search for the missing children, not only from his own community, but also from the Orthodox neighbors. This was not merely a gesture of goodwill, but a moral imperative for the children's sake. As the search continued for months with no sign of the missing children. By February of 1917, the Russians' internal decay were evidently known, and February Revolution. In November of 1917, the final blow came when the Bolsheviks seized power in the October Revolution, plunging Russia into civil war and withdrawing from World War I. For 8 months, children banished from the villages throughout the Carpathians. Despite vigilant efforts to keep their children close, the villagers couldn't prevent the disappearances. In April 1918, on the eve of Beltane, several more children went missing from the remote villages. This time, the resistance and even the occupying Central Powers mobilized to find the young ones. Toma and his group declared the temporary cessation of hostilities against the occupying forces for the search. They finally had a lead. One parent reported seeing his young daughter being carried off into the woods by dark figures. This revelation pointed to the Basiji Mountains, part of the greater Transylvanian Alps, and the location of the series of abductions. Villagers and even soldiers from the occupying forces converged. The local force was renowned as a haunted place where even the bravest of souls would dare not go. The villagers ignited torches and commenced their search for the girl and the other children who had been abducted. Toma recounted that the group ventured deep into the ominous forest, devoid of any discernible trails. Then, after hearing strange noises, one of the villagers alerted the others to what appeared to be a glow of bonfires deep within the forest. From there, the group pressed onward, guided by the sounds of muffled chants, the distant glow of fire, and the faint beating of tom-toms. It was then that they were assailed by the unholy sound of children screaming, some crying out for their parents. At this juncture in the narrative, Toma's eyes began to well up, clearly rekindling profound trauma. He swiftly wiped the tears from his face and advised me to refrain from returning to the house again. He asserted if it was indeed Elena, no good would come of it. I endeavored to press him further, but he remained resolute in his silence, and I did not press him. All right, that's it.
Wow, thank you. I really appreciate you bringing your military expertise, and that puts a really nice twist on it that you know what you're talking about. And I love when writers really know what they're talking about. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining us. I am going to have to kick you out, though. Godmother loves to just kick people in and out of the studio. It makes me feel very powerful. I'm going to add to the stage Robbie Dorman, and I am going to also add his book cover and give a little intro for those of you who don't know him. Robbie Dorman believes in horror. He's published 16 novels and co-hosts 2 podcasts, The Simpsons Show and The Cult Video Vault. When he's not writing, he's playing video games, watching pro wrestling, or walking his dog. He lives in Florida with his wife, Kim, and he thinks all narrative art should be anti-authoritarian. So, Robbie, I am going to kick myself out and let you take over.
Okay, thank you. This is a reading from my newest. It's called Yours Forever. It's an epistolary novel told in letters and follows the protagonist, Henry, as he delves deep below a Gothic mansion into a non-Euclidean maze in search of the stolen heart of his lost love. He writes to her throughout the novel. This chapter takes place shortly after Henry has descended into that maze of infinite doors and has just pushed through a new one. Death. There was only death behind the door. The yellow city, for its decay and rot, was clean and glowed golden, the scent of burnt sugar clinging to my nostrils as it lured me into its infinite, unspooling wilds. When I opened this door, I found myself in a world of flesh. The door fell out of my grasp, gone, vanished. But that is incorrect. It had not vanished. It had transformed. It took me a moment to understand, my eyes still adjusting to the red. Because the space glowed with an unearthly red. No lights visible, no lantern, no electric light, but everything a crimson that filled my vision. But then I realized the membranous, pulsating sphincter was the door I'd entered. It glistened in the crimson light, covered in some sort of thick liquid, and I hesitated to touch it, not even sure how to open it. I turned to survey my surroundings. I saw I was inside some sort of tremendous organ. The walls were flesh, various shades of pink and red, fibrous and muscled, with thick, wide, overarching beams of bone or cartilage. The floor itself was a springy, tongue-like material that moved as I stepped on it, my weight impacting it like a mattress. The space was enormous, a massive cavern, a cave of flesh I couldn't see the end of. Staring out into the red glow of the cave, I realized further ahead of me lay something different, not a piece of the flesh I stood on, but a darker substance, a deep red. The smell was not one of blood, not of copper and metal, but of putrid rot, of the deathly stink of gangrene, of flesh sloughing off the bone of the nearly dead. Then I saw I was not alone in this cavern of flesh. Bodies stacked and piled above my height, moldering, rotting, decaying corpses piled on top of each other, some nearly skeletons, others freshly dead, but all corpses, all dead. Everywhere I looked, I saw them now. The red glow of this organ I found myself in showing me them. They were not human corpses. They are humanoid of a sort, but their bones were thicker, larger, their bodies stooped, their faces craven like a rat. My curiosity picked at me to get closer to one, to examine it, to see the difference, for the study, for the science, but my stomach pulled me back, kept me from them. I should not touch them, could not touch them. I needed to find my way out, needed to be clear of this place. This was a place meant not for me, and my existence screamed in revulsion. Move forward, my mind shouted, and so I forced my feet onward. I wanted to retreat, to push through this fleshy passage behind me, but I needed to move if I was to ever find you. You might be on the other side of this. I had engaged on a journey of a straight line, and so on a straight line I would continue. I moved, the flesh pulsating under my feet, and I walked across this landscape of meat. The cavern was enormous, but I saw it was not infinite, the bounds of the walls covered by stacks of the dead others. But as I moved, I saw why the ground ahead of me was a dark crimson, the darkest shade present in this maroon grotto. It was not solid flesh at all, but liquid, the dark blood of whatever this place was. I stood on the shore of a bloody lake, and I looked across, and I saw the distant coast. I saw the pink tongue flesh on the other side of this body, and I saw the door. Traverse the lake of blood, and I could move on. But there was nothing to carry me across. There was no boat, no raft, no ladder, no bridge. I eyed the nearest pile of bodies and slipped on a pair of gloves I had, one by one, dragged them to the shore. Pieces of flesh came off of my hands, and I flung them away, swallowing back my disgust, the bile rising in my throat. Must not vomit. My rations were too valuable to waste. I dragged corpse after corpse over, not studying the difference in their physiology, keeping my eyes from focusing. I pulled a dozen corpses over, my lungs straining, breathing in this biologic air, and I pulled the rope from the bag and strung them together. I had made a wager in my mind to this process, and I hoped it would pay dividends. Otherwise, it was for nothing. My knots were tight, and the bodies were bound, and then it was only to see the soundness of my wager, and I pushed the bodies out into the crimson liquid. They floated, and I breathed again, and I scrambled aboard, my boots splashing through the shallows. I floated on a raft of the dead. I pulled out my small unfolded camp shovel, and I paddled with it, sliding it through the lake of blood. It was slow progress, but it was progress as I paddled. I kept my eyes forward, no different from a canoe journey I would make as a child, paddling with my father in the pond near my childhood home. No different, I told myself. I did not look at the piles of corpses or the viscera that floated in the liquid beneath me. I kept my eyes forward, drawing ever closer to the exit free of this accursed place, this hell of meat. But then a great noise from above me sounded, the sound of a massive sluice of pipework of plumbing. But there was no metal here, only a terrible throat, and I looked above to the sound and saw another orifice open, and thousands of corpses fell from it in a gout of flesh and blood. I only had a moment. I paddled desperately away, but they spilled onto my raft, knocking me off, pushing me down underneath the surface, and I took a desperate breath and closed my eyes, holding it tight to my shovel. My tenuous grip on it was the only thing that saved me. The bodies forced me down, and I swam, my pack heavy but buoyant, and it saved me as well. I swam to the side, hoping to find the edge of this monstrous intake of new meat, and I felt their hands and arms and legs and feet and faces, their torso, their skin, their organs submerged in this lake of blood, and I fought through it all. You were what saved me, because I imagined you somewhere deep inside this hell, and I would rescue you. I would rescue you. I would save you, and this abattoir would not be the end of me. I swam, I desperately swam, my lungs aching, my breath at an end, but then the swarm of bodies from above was not on me anymore, and I paddled to the surface of the horrible lake, and I reached it, and I pulled in a desperate breath, my lungs screaming in pain. But I could not stop the torrent of bodies and blood from above continuing, expanding, and I realized the base of this great lake was bodies, a mountain of bodies below a lake of blood, and I swam hard, stroke after stroke, the far pink distant shore. I did not stop to let my disgust register. I only thought of your heart. My own pounded as I swam, pushing myself to my limit, that I needed out, I needed escape, and I needed exit. And then I was there on the tongue shore, and I stepped out, my body and clothes soaked with gore and blood. I thought to look back, to consider this hell and what it was, but I pushed toward the membranous flesh door and pulled at its opening, and it cascaded open, and I went through. That's it.
Wow. Just in time for Valentine's. You're a romantic, Robbie.
That's me.
Yeah. If you look in the chat, you'll see you've sold a couple books already. So
good. Excellent.
Congratulations on that. I'm going to boot you out because we've got one more. Last but not least is Melanie Sue. And I am going to put her book cover up there in the corner so you can look at it. Melanie Sue is an American horror thriller author. She started writing dark poetry and unnerving short stories at a young age. Her writing can be seen in multiple anthologies. She is the author of Unalived and Bound in Terror. The first experience she had with horror was thanks to her parents when she was months old. They took her to see The Exorcist, as you do. She lives in Florida in the constant threat of hurricanes. Her tolerance for stress is higher than the average person, so don't be surprised when she laughs in the face of fear. She loves deep, falls hard, and believes in karma. Melanie will be reading from Bound in Terror for us, and I will put her information in the chat. Melanie, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
So this is from the very first chapter of Bound in Terror. And it starts off with Gideon Reese, who just got to work. He's gone down to Manasota Key, where he thought he would be retiring. But there's some interesting things going on. So Reese used his 2 index fingers to punch his password into the computer, and the screen changed in an instant. An email awaited him in his inbox. Normally, his email count in the morning was overwhelming, but he cleared them quickly. Delete, 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 flag for later. He liked a clean slate. The emails always came from reporters, his health benefits group, or sometimes the assistant state's attorney who had questions only he would remember about an earlier case. Today, however, there was only one email, and it was from an address he didn't recognize. Intrigued, he took his reading glasses out of his shirt pocket, leaned forward in his chair, and opened the email. Detective Reese, the proof is in the pudding. Look deep and you'll find who you're after. Best of luck, Bill. What is this crap? What the hell does that mean? Reese asked the computer screen. The email had 2 attachments, a document file and a video file. Against his better judgment, Reese opened the video. At first, he wasn't sure what he was seeing. The room on the screen was dark, but there were bright white lights strategically placed to illuminate a blue-gloved hand holding a 6-inch knife. The flat side of the knife was pressed against pale flesh, making a soft indent. The camera angle then widened to show the back upper torso of a female body. Her head was covered in a rose beige colored silk bag, almost the same color as her skin. She wore matching silk gloves, secured in leather cuffs, and attached to the sides of a stainless steel table that she was laid upon. The table was slowly pivoting to a 90-degree angle, the table's gears creaking as it went. A black silk sheet draped across her waist, fastened with clamps to each side of the table, concealing her bottom half. All Reese knew for sure was that the form on the table was a woman, her piercing screams confirming his initial assumption. He could imagine the pain she felt when the 6-inch blade entered her side at the top of her armpit, then made a swift slice to just above her waist. The faceless perpetrator, who he could only think to refer to as Blue Gloves, finessed the knife into the top layers of the victim's skin in the same way he would if he were filleting a salmon. The woman on the table pulled tight against the restraints. Reese saw the flow of blood form ribbons on her skin and pool around her body. He watched in horror as one blue-gloved hand pulled the loosened skin away from her muscles, while the other continued cutting. The knife made long strokes, skimming across the meat of her back as if removing the hide from an animal. When the cut reached the woman's knotty spine, The slicing and pulling stopped for a moment. Then Blue Gloves grabbed a piece of polished steel to hit the knife with a few times. Reese knew this would roll the edge of the knife back into place, sharpening it for the rest of the job. He couldn't watch any longer. In all his years as a detective, he had never seen anyone act out their gruesome crimes. The rapes, the murders, the beatings, he had seen all the depraved things mankind was capable of after the fact, and he was thankful for that small mercy. But this was something different. He clicked off the video and opened the document attached to the email, just as he heard his partner, Molly Boxer, down the hall. He began to read what looked like a news article ready for the day's press. But you'll have to read the book to read the email.
Oh, that's not fair. Thank you. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. People are on the edge of their seats now. Okay, I am going to bring everybody back to this stage. We're going to all fit in here. Welcome back, everybody. And we are now open for, questions, concerns, comments, complaints. I hope none. From the audience and or from our authors. We've done, we're coming up on the top of the hour, and I know I promised to not go over an hour, but if anyone has any final comments, questions.
I'm just seeing walls of flesh right now after Robbie's reading. It's just like
Yeah, that was definitely disturbing, dude. I like that.
Yeah, we
I
had
like
some
everyone's stories, honestly.
Yeah, great job, everybody.
Yeah.
fantastic job. And
Could
people
anybody
are
even
really
hear what
excited.
I was reading?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
We
We-
could hear you.
Absolutely.
we wanted
Yeah.
your kids to come in at the end when that would have been the perfect moment, where
Yeah.
you were building up to.
I was just staring at my screen, just like, my dad was like, just don't flip out. And be like, shut
Oh,
up.
they were fine.
No, that's fine. That happens.
Yeah.
So you are everyone's getting a lot of applause and, praise in the comments. So I
Aw.
hope you do
Thank
go
you,
and
Sally.
look at those.
Those were all really, really good stories. Like, I'm already like, okay, well, now I got to go through and freaking put all of these in my to be read pile.
Yeah,
Yes.
great job, everybody.
Fantastic. And thank you, audience, for coming and supporting us. Again, these videos will be available on my YouTube, both the entire group and the individual videos. So if there are no urgent burning questions, we will end. But you do have everybody's social media accounts, and you know how to reach the godmother if you have any questions that,
Thank
come
you,
up.
Elaine, for letting us do this. You're a
course.
great host. We really appreciate
Yeah, thank
it.
you.
Of course.
Thank you,
Thank
Elaine.
you.
Of course.
Thank you,
That's what
everyone.
we're here for. Of course. And I enjoyed having each of you. It was, like I said, I loved how different, everyone had something different to read. It wasn't this repetitive, everybody doing the same type of shit.
Yeah.
It was really, really cool the way
Different
it sort of
styles.
played out. Yeah. That made it really fun. So what I'm going to do is, if there are no burning questions, I'm going to go ahead and end the stream. And thank you all for being here. Authors, you can hang out for 1 minute. But audience, I'm going to let you go. Thank you so much for joining us and for
Bye.
all the
Thank
kind
you.
words. and
Bye. Thank
support.
you.